And we can,
which goes right back to the Furlough Fridays.
Furlough Fridays
right?
is the most. It's the most recent. It's the most dramatic. People outside Hawaii, when I talk to people in the federal Department of Education, they can't believe. I mean, we had very few school days to begin with.
That's right.
And then we say, oh, we've got less money, so instead of sucking it up and doing at least as good a job for the kids under difficult circumstances, it's like, well, the kids don't really need that schooling anyway. It's almost unbelievable to people outside Hawaii. And in Hawaii, I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out how that could have actually been agreed to.
Yeah.
And even now, when I think as a community we've recognized it just is wrong, the union is saying, well, then just pay us. And the governor's saying, well, the money's not there. And the union says, well, that's not our problem, that's somebody else's problem. It just doesn't seem to me that the best interests of the children are driving the decision-making processes going on right now.
Let me ask you about, you know, one of the things is we can't really hold accountable, say, the governor or the Board of Education or our teachers union or anything really. Like, we can see where problems are occurring. But one of the things that has been so frustrating for me as observing, like, the communication, what goes on in the DOE and everything, one of the very frustrating parts is that you will see, especially here at the Capitol, you will see the HSTA, HGA, the Board of Education, the Department of Education, all with one message. And even though they you know, even though outside of testifying and everything, they can tell you all the different problems that are going on in the Department of Education, they won't come out in a public way to say that here are the problems that exist. So it doesn't become an issue for people to fix. So, you know, like the BOE and DOE, HSTA, they constantly talk about needing more money. But they don't necessarily talk about, okay, well, the union contracts are hurting our principals, all the things that you have mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, what do you see that will break through that will get, you know, people to start speaking up as to how we can really make some and affect some change?
The irony of this is that I believe in unions. I believe that there have been times in our history and continue to be times now when unions play a vital role. And in terms of having the kind of balance that I think that's good for society and good for a community, I think unions can play an extremely positive role. I think today in Hawaii, the teachers union and the principals union are part of the problem in terms of what's wrong with our public education system. And it breaks my heart, because the more teachers that I've met and gotten to know and whose classes I've visited, and principals I've met, gotten to know, classes I've visited, I think on the whole we have some terrific people in our public education system. I really mean that. And yet the decisions that get made in their name are made by union officials who have no legal duty whatsoever to the children, but they have what are called fiduciary duties to their members. Their job, as they not only perceive it, but as the law requires it, their job is to get as much as they can get for their members, whether it comes from the children in terms of the children's needs or somebody else's. That's the job of the union officials. And right now, the union officials have such a lock on the legislature and the school board that, quite frankly, it's created, and a friend of mine from outside Hawaii calls it an iron triangle, but it's created a situation where public education is never really going to move forward until we figure out how to change the power equation. The unions love a highly centralized system. They love having one negotiation a year. They love negotiating with a group that includes the school board members. I just see it as a dysfunctional situation, and it's not the teacher's fault. It's not the principal's fault. And there are individual members of the legislature that I think are really, really good people. But right now, to get elected and to stay elected, an awful lot of people have the impression that they need to be a very good friend of the unions, which translates into doing what those union officials are saying the unions want, as opposed to what I think the teachers want, the principals want, the parents want, the community wants. And we've just ended up with this, to me it's dysfunctional, but it's not going to change until somehow or another that equation changes. Local school boards would have made a big change. For the unions to have to negotiate with individual school boards to where you would have something to compare. You know, here's the deal that this school board negotiated, here's the deal that that school board negotiated. It would provide a frame of reference and a form of competition that we simply don't have now.
I found that to be true, especially when talking with teachers and principals at the school level. I just really feel sorry for them in their struggle. I mean, it seems like they're operating in this very narrow path that they actually have control over. And at times, that control is really sacrificing the good teachers, you know, with what budget they have.
And you see it to some degree with the charter schools, to where compared to the regular schools and the DOE, the charter schools are public schools, but they're not part of this highly centralized top-down system. And even though they're grossly underfunded, and the Board of Education and the DOE, I think, has found a number of ways to make it a lot harder on the charter schools than what it needs to be, and certainly a lot harder than it should be. But even so, you look at just the esprit de corps, you look at the focus and the mission that is so obvious at a charter school, to where they can control their money more so than a regular DOE school. And they can make changes at that school level much more easily than in a regular DOE school. You don't like the way things are, well, get in line to go to the single school board and try to get some sort of attention to your situation. But the charter schools over here, relatively speaking, they can try to design something and to have it evolve in ways that the parents will like enough to bring their kids. It's a voluntary decision to enroll your children in a charter school. And I think the charter schools have the potential to really break us out of what I consider a rut that we're in. But when they're as underfunded as they are right now, frankly, they're successful if they simply survive. How can they thrive when they've got a budget that makes it almost impossible just to survive? That's what their focus all too often is just getting the bills paid.
Absolutely. Session after session, you know, this from the beginning of session to the ending of session, many of the principals are here basically talking about their funding because they've gone, they were the first to be cut, I think, anywhere in the state when, you know, even before our revenues started to decline, which was a real interesting.
The charter schools.
Yeah, the charter schools.
Absolutely.
The charter schools.